Nürburgring and Imola have all been visited before we end up here at Hockenheim for the final 3 races of the season. Good morning from a sunny Hockenheim. David Addison and Dave Richardson trackside. Max Verstappen is the man on pole position, and he is, of course, one of the drivers eager to try to secure the runners-up slot in the championship. The championship won last time out at Imola by Esteban Ocon, but, of course, Max Verstappen, already confirmed as a Formula 1 driver for next season. He's already had his first outings in the Toro Rosso, thanks to his Friday driving at the Japanese Grand Prix. Max Verstappen is going to be a potential race winner and very much a man who could take second in the championship, 3 points ahead coming into this race of Tom Blomqvist. Verstappen on pole, but Lucas Auer is the man who lines up second on the grid. Perversely, after what's been a really disappointing season on the whole for Muka Motorsport, Lucas Auer and indeed his teammate Felix Rosenqvist have looked a lot stronger this weekend. Auer was quickest of all in the 2 free practice periods on Friday morning, and then second in this qualifying session, standalone qualifying session purely for race 1. But here, at the end of the season, the Mercedes-powered cars looking strong. Tom Blomqvist in the Volkswagen-engined Carlin car, the Jaguar I Am liveried Carlin entry. He lines up third on the grid, 5 times a winner this year. Remember, he versus Verstappen for the runners-up slot in the championship. And then fourth on the grid is his teammate, Antonio Giovinazzi. So you go Van Amersfoort ahead of Muka, and then 2 Carlin cars, which means that for the first time all season, no Prema Power Team entry in the top 4 on the grid. There is Antonio Giovinazzi, double winner this year, and another driver that could do something in a race that's going to be 22 laps long on a nice wide circuit, Dave Richardson, and one which has some overtaking opportunities.
Yes, and going back to earlier in the season when they were here at Hockenheim, of course, we've seen that used, haven't we? They do find the opportunities here at Hockenheim to take advantage of this 4.5-kilometre circuit, which does present one of the most interesting spots, I always think, is off the parabolica when they run into the hairpin, because there's a couple of lines you can take around the hairpin, but often those lines are filled with other cars because, of course, it's a real pinch point, particularly on lap 1, where everyone is trying to go for a move there. And so that's going to be very, very interesting. As we look at Jordan King now on grid.
And he's 7th in the championship and he's 5th on the grid. He's not had a victory this season. He's had 3 second places, and he, of course, wants to put that right this weekend. The champion is 6th on the grid, Esteban Ocon, 9 times a race winner now. I'm still fascinated to know what the psychological situation is, because here he is, he's leading, he's won the championship, he's had 9 wins, okay, equalled now by Verstappen, but he's the one that doesn't have a confirmed F1 seat for next year.
That's very much the point I was going to make to you. How does he feel about that? We know he's going to be testing a Lotus car, of course, but, you know, he must feel slightly miffed, I would, surely. You know, you've been so dominant in the championship. Yet Max has, let's be truthful, Max has had races where he's been, and events where he's been absolutely outstandingly brilliant, whereas Ocon has been more measured, and I would almost feel a little bit done.
I agree, and we know, as you look down onto the grid at Felix Rosenqvist, who will start 7th, that Ocon doesn't like finishing 2nd in a race. 2nd is a good result. It's points. It helps for the championship, but the number of times we've seen him on the podium, having had a 2nd or a 3rd place, but not that win. He looks like all his rabbits have died. Now, to be in a situation where you've won the championship, but you're not being talked about to be a Grand Prix driver, yeah, it's got to affect him psychologically, surely. Now, there is Sean Gelael, 8th on the grid, his best qualifying of the season. Tremendous effort by the Indonesian driver, and all 3 of the Jaguar I Am cars then within the top 8 on the grid. And the big boss is here, Gerhard Berger, the president of the FIA Single-Seater Commission. Of course, his nephew is Lucas Auer, who was victorious here earlier on in the season. So I talk about the Muka Motorsport cars going strongly. Also, perhaps this circuit suits Auer. He was also a victor at the Nürburgring, as you look there at Felix Serralles, 9th on the grid. Felix, after a few seasons now in Europe, both in terms of Formula 3 and Formula Renault before it, now talking about going back to the States to continue his single-seater racing career. It's been a difficult year for him, and in fairness for Team Westtech, that stepped out of the European F3 Open to this very tough championship in a very tough year.
I was going to say, you know, how do you feel? Westtech will have taken this year. It's been a learning year, hasn't it? Well, we saw Rosenqvist. Now we see Gustavo Menezes, who's starting from P10.
And he's another of those drivers that's had a sort of yo-yo season. Some weekends good, some weekends bad. And ultimately, you come back to the fact, as Ed Jones is there 11th on the grid, that this is the most competitive FIA Formula 3 European Championship we've had. It's probably more competitive than many of the older F3 Euro Series days. and therefore to be good all season. And 33 races is a long calendar.
Yes.
To be consistent across that, you have got to be good. And even Ocon has had occasional retirements, some caused by contact or he's out of the points because of penalties. But stringing together a really good season has been arduous for many of them. There's Roy Nissany, 12th on the grid. He's got better as the year has gone on as well, the Israeli driver. Engines fire up then. It'll be one further warming up lap to get some warmth into the Hankook tyres. And then it'll be into race conditions. 2 races they have today, one tomorrow. This is the final DTM weekend of the season, the FIA Formula 3 European Championship, which supports something like 70% of the DTM events. It does then go off and does its own thing, such as the Pau Grand Prix, which was a big success. The races at Spa, some of the best races in any category all season. The WEC support race at Silverstone, and then last weekend in the beautiful Parkland circuit of Imola. There is, by the look of it, a gap on the grid, just looking down, because as the cars are ready to go, I have a feeling that Santino Ferrucci is missing. The Fortec driver there, you can see the gap that is on the grid. At the rear is Jake Dennis, who had an engine change before qualifying and therefore has to take these template grid drops going into the remaining 3 races of the year. The cars blast away from the grid now. And is everybody away safely and cleanly? Yes, they are. But as the cars get away, there is a gap. It may not, in fairness, be Ferrucci, but we'll double check. There is certainly a gap. The grid shuffled because of Jake Dennis being put to the rear of it, and so the cars work their way out of the Nordkurve up towards the approach to the Parabolica, the Einfahrt Parabolica, and then the speed builds. It was here in the DTM a few years ago, of course, that there was the huge accident that took out Tom Christensen and gave him pretty severe concussion. But in Formula 3, speed builds up to this point, and if you're in the slipstream, if you get the draft, then you can make a move through the Parabolica, diving into the Spitzkehre here, the hairpin. Let's just have a quick look at the grid. It's Verstappen, Auer, Blomqvist, Giovinazzi, King, Ocon, the top 6, ahead of Rosenqvist, Galal, Sorales, and his mate Gustavo Menezes to round out the top 10 on the grid. After that, 11th starter is going to be Ed Jones, who was another that was in the wars a little bit at Imola, like Felix Rosenqvist. Roy Nissany is 12th. Fuoco, Antonio Fuoco, double winner this year. Quite a long way back. He's 13th ahead of Tatiana Calderon. Guest driver Nick Cassidy not scoring points. 15th on the grid ahead of Jules Kowiak, Dennis van der Laar, Santino Ferrucci. Stefano Coletti, the Monegasque GP2 race winner, 19th. Coming to try and help Euro International sort out the car and out qualifying season regular teammate Michele Beretta. And then Alex Toril, Sandro Zeller, Andy Chang, Spike Goddard and the penalised Jake Dennis will round out the grid. And as I say, there is one car that is missing from the very back, and I'll double check for you in a moment when the cars slot back into place exactly who it is. The grid shuffled with Jake Dennis's penalty to put him at the back and therefore jumble things up a little after where he would have initially started.
As they came through, I wondered whether it was Zeller that was missing.
Could be. We'll have a look whether the cars form back up again. Yeah. So this is the circuit layout, 4.5 kilometres, 22 laps in prospect, and it is the far side of that graphic really where you can anticipate the moves to come, heading into that really tight hairpin. And it works 2 ways. You either make a move there and that triggers action, or you get it wrong, or you force somebody wide and more happens on that run down towards the next section of the circuit coming into the Mercedes Tribune. At the end of the lap, the echoes of Hockenheim's past still reverberate with the huge grandstands and the traditional stadium section. But of course, it's really turn 2 where they cut across the back of the paddock and ignore the good old circuit that went out into the forests. That's the new look, not that new now, something like a decade old, of Hockenheim. So the cars form up on the grid with Max Verstappen then on pole position. The car having garnered Red Bull colours in the last couple of months. And as the last few drivers will slot into place, up towards the rear of the grid comes Jake Dennis. He'll be one to watch, I think, to see if he can make progress. The engine change happened in just under an hour yesterday, which is pretty good going. Esteban Ocon, you've had a look at who is on the grid. And so, as the cars then now are ready to go, as soon as the green flag is shown at the back, the lights will start to go red. 5 red lights on. When the 5 lights go out, we are racing now for round 31, and a great start by Verstappen, who romps clear already of Lucas Auer, but Tom Blomqvist tries to level with him on the outside line going into the first corner. He can't go round the outside, but Tom Blom hangs on to 3rd ahead of Giovinazzi. One runs way out wide, which I think might have been Roy Nissany. Jake Dennis is on the move already, and there's drama at the back of the pack as one of the T-Sport cars has gone around up towards the Einfahrt Parabolica. Then they come for the first time, but Verstappen has gone already. Look, he's already checked out, and it's Toriel. Alexander Toriel is in strife. He sorts himself out and rejoins as the leaders power their way up then towards the Spitzkehre for the first time. And this is where you're going to see some shuffling of the order, surely, as they get to the breaking point with Giovinazzi fourth, the cork in the bottle there. Look, 3 wide all around him. They're trying to go 4 wide into the braking zone further back, including Antonio Fuoco, who's looking to gain ground. And contact comes. That's one of the Westech cars, Andy Chang, who has gone into the back of Ferrucci and turned him around. Santino Ferrucci, who has switched to Fortec for the last couple of meetings, but I'm afraid that tag in the tail has turned him around. And there, look, Giovinazzi almost runs into Jordan King and Ocon way wide.
So, as we expected then, the hairpin providing the opening action here in this Formula 3 race from Hockenheim. End of term special almost after a very, very hard season for them. Verstappen leading from Auer, then Blomqvist. So through the final turn as they head towards the timing line to complete the first lap of 22 here. The 1, 2, 3, look, have already built a gap over Giovinazzi, Verstappen, Auer, and Blomqvist kind of getting away here.
Over the timing line, 7/10, the margin at the end of lap 1. Verstappen to Auer, and then Blomqvist it is who runs in 3rd place. The field streams through turn 1 there, including Ed Jones, who's on the back of the Kiwi Nick Cassidy. Nick Cassidy, who has come across to the T-Sport team. And now, look, Tatiana Calderon splits the pair of them up into 14th place, going towards the Parabolica, the bright yellow car in the hands of Tatiana Calderon. Good racecraft there, gains track position. But up front, Max Verstappen getting away from Lucas Auer. He's just pulled another 2 tenths in the first sector alone. But the one to watch now could be Blomqvist, because he's inching up onto the back of Auer. 3 different teams in the top 3 places now. Jordan King versus Gustavo Menezes at the hairpin for 7th place. Progress from Fuoco is a bit underwhelming at the moment. He's only in 11th spot. And the race leaders work their way for the second time through the Mercedes tribune. Through they go. And a lock up there. And that was Fuoco letting Roy Nissany through. And Jake Dennis running wide, yeah. He had been making progress, hadn't he?
Yes, he had. He got up to P17 at one point, Jake Dennis, so him put to the back of the grid because of an engine change that, as David said, was undertaken and completed in an hour yesterday between free practice and qualifying, and that's why Jake Dennis taking that grid penalty. So Verstappen then 7/10 last time over the timing line over Lucas Auer, and then, as you said, Blomqvist beginning just to reel in Auer a little bit.
Somebody else who's being a bit subdued is Esteban Ocon, who is in 6th place, which is pretty decent in its own right, but it's not really the storming progress that you might have expected from the new champion. You're looking at the full race order on the graphic at the moment as the cars work their way through. Ferrucci running in 22nd spot after his tag. Andy Chang 23rd, recovering in 24th is Alex Toriel. I think the one that might have been missing from the grid, in fact, was Coletti, but he could, because there's one car running out of sequence, be back in the race, having started from the pit lane. But we'll try and confirm in a lap's time when he next comes over the timing beam. The lead gap is coming down. Lucas Auer has just done the best of anybody in the first sector. He has only taken 68 thousandths of a second out of Verstappen's margin. But as they say, every little helps.
Yes. Yes, they do. So there was Antonio Fuoco. Just saw the back end of Fuoco's car in P12. And there we can see the F3 this year, more than any other, I think it's fair to say, the support has been tremendous, David.
And Antonio Fuoco has this fan club, this rowdy fan club, as you've seen, that goes everywhere. Yeah, they've racked up some air miles, haven't they, this year? And a couple of victories have been the reward. Right, Auer has done 2 absolute bests in sectors here. The Muka Motorsport car, then the orange Dallara Mercedes running in 2nd place. There it is, closing up onto the back of Max Verstappen. Lucas Auer, a bit of an old hand in Formula 3 terms. And there, sideways, thought for a moment it was his dad, because that was Stig's line, but Tom Blomqvist sideways, heading then now out of the Sud Curva over the timing line. He's dropped back from Lucas Auer, who has just done the fastest lap of the race. All that work has been done, and he's gained just under a 10th of a second, but he's inching up onto the back of Max Verstappen.
And Rosenqvist and Giovinazzi then, who are in their own little battle there as Rosenqvist is beginning to reel Giovinazzi in. That is for P4 as we get a replay of the start here.
Indeed so, and as the lights go out, just have a look at Verstappen, because he absolutely nails this. Straight across the front of Blomqvist comes Auer. wasn't able to cut across, so he has to do a little bit of jinking to try and find the space, but he claims the line for turn 1. And then Toril, near the back of the grid, runs wide, floors it, catches a little bit of the grasscrete, loses it, and a real magic roundabout job that, because he went round a couple of times. Dennis van der Laar running wide. Yes, it's a little step in the curb, I think, isn't it, that just unsettles Toril's car.
Jake did jolly well to avoid that, didn't he, Jake Dennis?
Indeed so. So round goes Alexander Toril. And then this was the scene up at the Spitzkehrer hairpin. Have a look at the back of the shot, because Andy Chang locks up the inside, bang, finds Santino Ferrucci, turns him around. That will potentially have done a bit of damage to the wing end plates of Chang's car. And that, in replay as well, is the car of Roy Nissany running wide into the Mercedes tribune. Fuoco goes round the outside, but then gets himself on the wrong line and has to really wrestle the car through the corner. Blomqvist is very definitely falling away in that third place, isn't he? And of course, this has an impact on what goes on for second in the championship. Verstappen comes into this race 3 points ahead of Blomqvist, but he won't be able to wrap up second in the championship race in this first event of 3 of the weekend, but the points will be important for him. Now,
here's a theory for you, and I'm sure I'm going to be proven wrong by you, but it's the last 3 races of the season. Have Muka Motorsport, have they decided just to turn the wick up a little bit on the Mercedes engine, because if it all... do you know what I mean? Because Auer is looking more... And he is reeling Verstappen in now.
It is possible. I mean, as I said before the race started, he won here at the start of the year, so you could argue that this is a circuit for which Auer and Muka Motorsport have a good setup, good data, good track knowledge, good confidence.
Yes.
But even so, Auer is delivering the goods. He's been quick all weekend. This isn't just a one-off, is it? He's been quick across practice and qualifying. So you could be right. You could be onto something here. But what we need to see is whether he can sustain this. The Van Amersfoort racing car up front, and the gap has come down again within the first sector. It was 0.7 between the leading cars at the end of the lap. The other one that's in a big hurry, in 4th place now, is Antonio Giovinazzi, because he has done the best of anybody in Sector 1. And there you can see the second of the yellow perils look, closing onto the back of his teammate, Felix Rosenqvist, 5th. Fair play to Rosenqvist, because he had a huge accident at Imola in race 3, really badly bruised his arm and was pretty shaken by it. So Rosenqvist has bounced back in fine style.
And he's sticking with Giovinazzi, isn't he?
He is, actually, yes, you're right. He's staying with him indeed, and he's staying ahead of Ocon, who is 6th, King 7th, Menezes 8th, Galal is 9th, and 10th is Felix Sorales. Now, the race leaders have just come through and done 5 laps as we cross live to our judicial correspondent at the other end of the box.
Well, Toril, of course, who had a turnaround at Imola, also had a turnaround here earlier on. He's now receiving the black and white flag for failing to manage the track limits. And the place where it really happens here is turn 1, and we can see that on screen. It's so obvious, isn't it?
And in every session, not just Formula 3, but every category as well of the weekend, the number of people that have either had times taken away for not managing track limits or been warned about track limits is just extreme. And so it would be no surprise if penalties did not fly in this race. We're in the early stages of it. Granted, we're on lap 6, 5 done, as you can see from the graphic. But as the field works its way then now down towards the Parabolica and up towards the Spitzkehrer, Verstappen's advantage has gone out again. It's up to 1.2 seconds. So take that, Lucas Auer.
Yes. So there we can see Roy Nissany, Tatiana Calderon, and Jake Dennis up to P15 now. Now, bearing in mind, Jake Dennis has done this from the back of the grid, as we mentioned earlier. He took that grid penalty because of an engine change, which was conducted very quickly indeed. He's making good progress.
He is making good progress. That grid drop penalty system is something that really does exercise people in the paddock, because many think it's unfair that you have a mechanical problem and then you get 3 races effectively ruined because you're 10 places lower down on the grid. Gerhard Berger's attitude is, no, we've had the rule, and it sort of balances its way out over 33 races. And actually what it does prevent is the big buck teams changing engines race after race after race to get ultimate performance and being able to run them right on the margin. So you can understand his point of view as well.
Yes. Well, I would think that, you know, where are we? Lap 6 of 22. You know, a decent points finish is not off the table, is it, for Jake Dennis, potentially?
Trouble is, he's got to do it all over again in races 2 and 3. It's not like other championships where your race 1 result determines your race 2 grid. It's all done on qualifying times. There's 1 extra session for races 2 and 3, and you take your 2 best lap times for those 2 grids. But in his case, plus 10 positions for the drop. So we're on to lap 7. Verstappen leads our. Third is Blomqvist. Giovinazzi fourth. Rosenqvist fifth. This is the battle for sixth. Ocon ahead of Jordan King, and the gap between them was 0.7 of a second at the start of the lap. In 8th place is Gustavo Menezes. 9th is Sean Galal going strongly. 10th is Felix Serrales for the moment. And then out of the points, 11th, Antonio Fuoco.
Next to be warned for track limits is our P3 driver, Tom Blomqvist.
Interesting, interesting. We saw him get sideways, didn't we, coming a few laps ago through the Sud-curve, but there he is, coming in now to the stadium once again. This the traditional end of lap of Hockenheim, and Ocon is going to have to stick out his elbows soon, isn't he, because the Frenchman is being caught by Jordan King.
You made the point earlier, he looks subdued, doesn't he? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's just kind of doing it, really.
Yeah, he doesn't have a lot to prove now. The championship is his. But you never know, Esteban Ocon, if he gets a decent start for race 2 later in the day. Don't rule him out. But Verstappen has looked so good around here. And he really has nothing to lose, has he? Because he's got the seat in his pocket for next year. He knows exactly what he's doing. He's got to deliver. We said at the Nürburgring, just a day before the news broke that he was going to be a Formula 1 driver, that the Red Bull management are pretty ruthless. Many have been picked up by the scheme thinking it was Christmas, and they haven't lasted 12 months. But Max Verstappen is going to be thrown into a Formula 1 race seat in just his 2nd year of car racing. He's going to be thrown into a car that is quick, but it's not a race-winning car. So what do you gauge his performance on next year in Formula 1?
It was really interesting because I had a long conversation with Jos Verstappen at the Red Bull Ring, and he alluded to, you know, there's going to be some big news about Max, and I don't think in our wildest dreams we expected that enormous jump straight away.
No, it has been perhaps more likely to think maybe GP2 or Formula Renault 3.5, but it does illustrate the regard in which he's held by Helmut Marko. Now this is Sean Galal versus Felix Serrales for 9th place, and Serrales now gets the car up the inside, coming towards the Sachs-curve. They almost bang wheels. They do bang wheels. Take that. Serrales gets forced out wide, and so Sean Galal ahead of him as they drop down towards the stadium through the right-hander. These grandstands tomorrow for the DTM finale are going to be absolutely full. Early morning here for the Formula 3 drivers, and Felix Serrales in replay here tried to make the move, tried to get up alongside Sean Galal, whose car just grows in width at this point. They do touch, and Serrales bumps into the air, rattles over the curb, and eventually will have to slot back in behind him. But whether there's any lasting damage to either car, we'll wait and see. There's the interlocking wheels, and wait to go around the corner. The brush comes, and Serrales loses time as a result of that. Galal hangs onto the place.
He remained committed, didn't he, Serrales, and paid the ultimate price, didn't he, really?
Indeed so. Jordan King still committed as well, isn't he, here to the back of Esteban Ocon's car. But Esteban, as we keep saying, just a little bit undercooked in this race relative to those ahead of him. The new champion. It's a shame when a champion ends his season like this, because it doesn't really give you the true reflection of the guy's ability, and we have said all year how impressive he has looked. Jordan King launched himself up the inside under braking, and that looked pretty easy.
It did. Ocon just has a fight back here. They're side by side now. This is going to liven up now, perhaps.
Ocon's got the inside line heading into the Mercedes Tribune, but Jordan King's got the inside line for the next corner. He'll brake later. He's got the shorter line. Ocon perhaps spurred into action here, rattles out wide over the curb, and he has to slot back in behind. And we've got a yellow flag now within the first sector because somebody has had a drama up at the hairpin. Let's have a look here in replay. This is turn 1. This is the Nord-curve. And that is Michele Beretta, who got it wrong at turn 1, and it finished at turn 2, and that's why we've got the yellow flag, because the car just runs wider and wider and wider. It gets sideways, and look at the way that the surface changes. You go from the tarmac to the grass, to the tarmac to the grasscrete, and eventually the car loses its battle against traction, spits itself towards the wall. Santino Ferrucci, his former teammate, goes around the outside, so there's a battered car, but there might also be some debris on the road.
Sean Galal has been given a black and white flag for a dangerous manoeuvre. So Sean Galal, the next to have a message posted about him on the notice board that we have.
And that's the move on Serrales, isn't it, to squeeze him out. So, OK.
Is that a bit harsh?
Slightly. I mean, we like to see good, hard racing, and then a driver gets stamped on for being very defensive. He didn't weave around. He was just aggressive in that defence. But anyway, the race director, Sven Stopper, has decided that that is worthy of a finger wag, if nothing else. We're on lap 10 of 22 in this 31st race of the season. There's Jordan King's move. He came from a fair way back, granted, but Esteban Ocon had left the door wide open. He'd also put the red carpet out virtually to welcome him home.
Invitation there, wasn't there really, but... And then they got absolutely side by side here.
He was a bit more toey here, wasn't he?
Yes.
Very feisty Ocon, but he gets forced out wide over the curb. And Jordan King, who I am surprised has not had a victory this year. He was good in British Formula 3 last year. He's been 3 times a race runner-up, but not a victory yet, but proved that he can still race. Max Verstappen, in the meantime, if you cast your mind back, 8 laps or so, we were talking about the fact that he was being caught by Lucas Auer. Scrap that, because he is now on his own. The gap was 1.7 last time. It's 1.7 this time, and by thousandths of a second he's quicker again than Lucas Auer, so he's continuing to build the gap. Tom Blomqvist is 3rd, Antonio Giovinazzi is 4th, Felix Rosenqvist 5th, and Jordan King now up into 6th place.
You see, Verstappen, I think, and other people have clearly recognised this in him, despite his age, despite his relative inexperience, he drives very maturely, doesn't he? He's managing that gap. I remember you and I having the discussion at the Nürburgring where the car failed, and how he was so very sensible rather than blitz it and blow it up in case the engine could be saved. You know, he cruised it back into the pit lane.
And there was no teenage tantrum when he got out of the car. For a 16-year-old, he was pretty mature about that, you're right. But that maturity has come during the season. I remember seeing him at Po, where he was breathtakingly quick and spectacular, but he was on the edge.
Okay.
And twice in the races he was bitten as the car hit the wall. When he came back after Po, the next rounds were at the Hungaroring, and he didn't shine, but he was largely error-free. And then we got to Spa, and he won all 3 races.
Yes.
And then we went to the Norris Ring, and he won all 3 races. And then he won the Zandvoort Masters. And that mid-season crest of the wave, that was when something was unlocked in him, where I think he realised that he was quick and he was brave, but he could do this. And he'd worked out where the line was, and he was staying the right side of it.
I think you're right.
Tom Blomqvist, a season of frustration, really, because Tom is the more experienced of the racers within the top 3, and in the championship this is, and where does he go next? Because the budget isn't there.
That was going to be my question. You know, we've seen a lot of Tom in Euro F3, haven't we? Delighted that he was back. You know, it wasn't a given that he was going to be in this season, was it? No. By any means. And I think it's Jagonja IAM have made that happen for him. Where does Tom Blomqvist go from here?
It is a good question, because you have to keep winning races and winning championships, and he's not going to do a championship victory this season. Maybe a sports car career ultimately is where he will end up, because that increasingly is where the young guns not only go, but they go and get paid, and it's a career to be made. But Tom, who's always wanted to go the race route, not like his father, with admittedly a rally cross and race route. Stig was a successful driver in all 3, but Tom very much a single-seater racer.
Do you think that, you know, in full visibility of everyone here at a DTM weekend, that is a possibility that he might get picked up for a test next year?
In a DTM car? Not sure, because he's a Volkswagen motivated driver, and therefore I don't think he's going to be offered a BMW or a Mercedes drive, but there is an Audi possibility. But Audi has got so many drivers on its books, and it's got people from his region anyway.
Fair point.
And I know he's a Brit, but he's of Swedish descent. You've got Matthias Ekström, who ticks that box.
Absolutely.
And you've got Jamie Green, who ticks the British box. So from a geographical point of view, I'm not sure. A GT drive maybe, but DTM, I'd find that harder to see. Now, have a look at the background here, because it's game on, isn't it? Down towards the stadium. Roy Nissany versus Tatiana Calderon. Calderon on the outside line has to give way. This is for 12th place. They're out of the points, but you wouldn't think it, would they? This is a pretty intense battle. Roy Nissany just staying ahead at the moment of Tatiana Calderon. There's Antonio Fuoco's Prema Power Team car, which is struggling in 11th place. And actually, just to pick up on that and to go back also to Esteban Ocon and saying he's looking a bit underwhelming, maybe some of this has to be laid at the door of Prema Power Team, because it's hard to find any of their cars that are really outstanding.
Yes, no, that's a fair point.
Felix Morales here in 9th place. He's ahead of Sean Galal now, so the move has happened that puts the Puerto Rican ahead of the Indonesian. And the Galal family deserves a big cheer, because you make the point about Jagonja IAM supporting Blomqvist and Giovinazzi. It's Sean Galal's father who is the leading fast food franchise owner in that region, and his money doesn't just go to his son's racing, but it's also created this satellite team. And it's no exaggeration to say that without that money, there'd be no Blomqvist or Giovinazzi on the grid. So well done, Galal Senior, for allowing that all to happen, as you now look at the Nissany Calderon fight for 12th and 13th places. Up front, though, Max Verstappen is going to take an outstanding 10th victory of the season, potentially. That's the other thing that should be motivating Ocon, to try and win more races than Verstappen. He might yet do it, but it's going to be Verstappen ahead by 1, seemingly, if he's able to hang on to this race lead. This is lap 13 of 22, or 35 minutes, depending on which comes first, but with no safety car period looking likely, then it's going to be just the straight 22 laps. And to go back to Stefano Coletti, he was missing off the grid. He did join in from the pit lane. I wonder whether it was a deliberate ploy, that, to just get him out of traffic and let him run in clear air and see whether he could do the fastest lap and therefore give Euro International a better indication of the pace of that car. Because they've struggled for data all year with inexperienced drivers, or drivers bailing from the season early, as happened to Riccardo Agostini, for example. So maybe this is so Coletti can give them a true indication of the pace of that car. I've got to say, the pace ain't good, because his lap times are a lot slower than Verstappen's. It may therefore be a problem that caused him to start from the pit lane. But Verstappen, no dramas at all, and he now leads, look at it, by 2.5 seconds.
Well, reinforcing what has been some incredible performances from that young man, and of course he goes into these 3 races here. He's going to be on the crest of a wave. Of course, he would have loved to have won this championship. That was denied at Imola, wasn't it, when as was expected to be fair, Esteban Ocon took the championship honours, but of course Verstappen in such a good place, knowing his future is assured, certainly in the short term.
I'm going to argue with you, not for any other reason than just to illustrate the sort of season Max Verstappen's had. I think it was lost here at the start of the year.
Okay.
Because he had a retirement in race 2 and he had a non-start in race 3, and things like that, you can't afford to have 2 non-scores back-to-back. He'd already had 1 non-finish at Silverstone, and while that was happening, Ocon was always on the podium virtually. He only had 1 drama with fuel surge, and that's what dropped him off the podium here earlier on in the season. Andy Chang in the pit lane. We saw him get involved with Ferrucci earlier on in the race. But, yeah, I think Verstappen's season had unravelled a little bit. You know, he was always on the back foot, wasn't he? He was always playing catch-up right from the start of the season.
So, to return to my judicial duties, Santino Ferrucci, the next to be warned for exceeding track limits. And that at turn 1, and a bit of flapping going on there, isn't there? Is that the Shimkoviak car?
It is indeed. Haven't seen a wobble like that since a lap dancing club visit as it lurches into its pit lane, because that is a very wobbly nose cone. Clearly, that has had a big old rattle somewhere, and Jules Shimkoviak comes into the pit lane, and the team at Van Amersfoort will go to work to effect repairs, but the danger is here that he's going to lose a lap. So whatever happens now becomes a test session effectively for race 2. Have a look at that. Not quite sure whether he hit something or somebody, or whether that was just curb abuse. Here's the answer. He's gone into the back of Jones, I think. Clunk, yes, going up towards the Einfahrt Parabolica. And so that dislodges the wing on the front. The aero fades away, and rattling over the curbs like that won't have done it a power of good either. No.
Clearly, the nose change is not being the work of a moment here, as the team work really hard. They have done it now.
But as I say, if he drops off the lead lap, then any chance for good result is gone. But at least there's a bit of testing to be done for race 2 to make sure that the car hasn't got any other damage.
Sure.
So it is worth going out. Often the question is, why do people bother when they're so far back and can't score points? Well, it's if there's multiple races over a weekend, there is mileage to be gained. Max Verstappen, in the meantime, is 2.8 seconds ahead of Lucas Auer. This is Lucas Auer, winner in the championship this year, winner in the championship last year, versus Max Verstappen, who's yet to do a full season of car racing. It does make you think.
Extraordinary, as we see that man now. There he is, Max Verstappen.
I tell you, Macau's going to be special this year, isn't it? Because Ocon excelled around the streets of Po. Verstappen crashed quite a lot at Po. But now, as we've been saying, the new Max Verstappen, the more mature Max Verstappen, going to Macau for the first time. That will be something to watch later in the year, the non-championship end-of-season bonanza. But here, I mean, Verstappen has just driven away from the rest of them.
And whilst he has 2.8 over hours, we see Auer coming to the picture now. Just look how those two have got away from Blomqvist, Giovinazzi and Rosenqvist.
Exactly, yeah. And everyone's in the same type of car. They're all in the same Dallara chassis. Yes, it's down to the engine. Yes, it's down to the way you work as a driver with that gang of engineers to get the setup and get everything absolutely right. But You know, we've not seen a lock-up from Verstappen, we've not seen him sideways, we've not seen him over the curb. You still find it, or I still find it, hard to really appreciate when you look at him that he's not done a full season of car racing yet. I know he's done a lot of testing, I know he's had a lot of mileage this year, but he does belie that lack of experience. And now, as he worked his way up once again towards the Parabolica, heading into this tight right, the Einfahrt Parabolica, he's on his own. No pressure on from anywhere around him, and he's just doing the job perfectly.
He's able to control it, isn't he?
Yeah.
Just from the corner of my eye, I've noticed one of the Deutsche Post runners sprinting up the pit lane, so stand by, because I think there might be more legal news coming your way in moments from now.
Oh, right, okay.
Our trackside position right at the top of the tribune here in the main grandstand. Just from the corner of my eye, as I say, saw that Deutsche Post runner doing just that, running up the pit lane, as we see super slow-mo there of Max Verstappen then with the Red Bull livery now, of course, which he's had for the last few races, hasn't he, since that was announced.
One of the other things that's been a regular feature of the championship, we talked about Antonio Fuoco's fan club, is the huge banner that accompanies Max Verstappen that says overtaking is an art.
Yeah,
well,
absolutely.
Actually, there's not been much of it from Max in this race because he has been so dominant out of the blocks from pole position. Goodbye, he's just driven away. And these replays of him using all of the road but not going over the track limits, inch perfect. Lucas Auer in second place, and then Tom Blomqvist, and he's 4.9 seconds back from Lucas Auer.
Yeah.
Fascinating to see, as you make the point, Dave, the gaps have opened up so markedly over the course of the race. So Verstappen, Auer, Blomqvist, Giovinazzi, Rosenqvist, King, Ocon 7th, Menezes, Serrales, Galile, the top 10. Talked about Prema Power Team's disappointing run in this. Ocon only 7th, Fuoco out of the points 11th. They're a car down anyway. Nicholas Latifi not here this weekend. He's racing in the Formula Renault 3.5 series, having worked out that his season in Formula 3 really wasn't going to deliver results, and so he's been shopping around looking at other categories like Renault 3.5, like the Carrera Cup GB. He raced in that at Rockingham back in September.
Just saw Coletti through the pit lane. I don't know whether he's stopped in the pit lane or whether he's returned out again, but
he stopped.
Yeah,
he's in there still, so it does suggest that it's a problem that caused him not to start with everybody else, doesn't it? Yes, good spot. He had got himself up to 22nd, but that was largely because of the travails of others, and he's now going to drop down again because of this, as you say, elongated pit stop. So the race leader is Max Verstappen here at Hockenheim, round 31 of the championship. The FIA Formula 3 European Championship is 33 races long. One more today, the grand final tomorrow, and it is Verstappen leading by 2.7 seconds over Auer, Blomqvist third, Giovinazzi fourth, Rosenqvist fifth, and King sixth, as midfield battles work their way out of the Mercedes tribune. Now there is 27th, Rosenqvist fifth, but ignore Szymkowiak because there he is a lap down after the pit stop. So it's Rosenqvist versus Jordan King effectively in the blue car there, the back of the shot. Jordan King sixth, but for as long as he's stuck behind Szymkowiak, Rosenqvist is going to get away from him.
Yes, absolutely. Just looking at Jake Dennis's progress, which has stalled somewhat, hasn't it? He's still down there in P15, which is where he was a few laps ago. As there was my prediction that he could potentially get into the points, as we see the end of the race, presumably now for Stefano Coletti, and the Euro International car is out of the car now.
And so here to try and help the team, but the Monegasque GP2 winner won, in fact, in GP2 at Monaco earlier in the year, walks away to have a look at what's going on in the race. But frustration, there are still 2 more races to come, so hopefully his weekend will improve. Jake Dennis, of whom we were talking, has just crossed the timing line in that 15th spot. But it's surprising the way the gaps have opened up, because still we've got the late teens coming over the timing line, as here, 2/3 of the way around the lap is Max Verstappen.
I know. And his margin over Lucas Auer last time around increased to 3.2.
And on this lap, just to rub everyone's nose in it, Verstappen has done the best of anybody in the first sector. He knows how to treat the opposition, doesn't he? So he's still storming on. This is Verstappen working his way towards the end of lap number 19. Win number 10 of the season is heading his way, and what a season it has been. Verstappen on his own, using all of the road, comes up then, the pit entry to the right. The Van Amersfoort team ready with the pit boards, which will tell him that he's P1, which he's probably gathered. He comes over the line now, a long way clear, 3.4 seconds ahead of Lucas Auer, and looking very strong indeed. It's his race to lose, but as we've been saying, the more measured, the more mature, the more confident Max Verstappen does not often make mistakes now.
No, and he looks just so composed out there, doesn't he? And as you say, in that first sector, setting the fastest of anyone in the first sector, proves he's still pushing and he's still on it, isn't he?
Yeah.
Go back to where are we now? Hour 3.4 behind. Then it's a long way back before we get to P3, which is Tom Blomqvist still.
Now this is relevant because you've got Calderon up now into 12th place. Roy Nissany ahead is 11th, Ed Jones 13th, and Antonio Fuoco, who was in 11th, has been mugged and he's been forced into 14th place, and he's got some wing damage. Look, there's a little bit of flapping wing end plate on the left front corner of the car. He's ahead of Jake Dennis, but Fuoco, that's been 11th for the bulk of the race, now is down in 14th spot, so he's had a moment somewhere. It might have been a small mistake, but just opened the door enough to enable the opposition to scamper past. But this is a very un-Prema Power team-like race, isn't it?
Yes, you're right, it is. So there is Antonio Fuoco then, P14. And right behind Fuoco is Jake Dennis, who's still there in P15. Remember, started from the very back of the grid.
And lapping quicker in the sectors than Fuoco, so he might gain another place. The frustration for Jake in the Racing Steps Foundation colours is that he's still going to be outside the points. All that work, and it will achieve nothing in championship terms for him. In championship terms, Verstappen, by being ahead of Blomqvist, will extend that gap going into race 2. That's the Fuoco fan club. They can still cheer, but there's a limited amount to cheer for in this race. So Verstappen is on his penultimate lap. Here comes Fuoco with the Italian tricolor livery. The green, white and red of Italy on the side of the car. Over the timing line he comes now. And the gap between Fuoco and Jake Dennis is 0.7 of a second. I am surprised the race hasn't been fiercer for some positions, because normally this is a circuit that does give good racing, and we saw drama on the first lap or so, particularly up at the Parabolica, but things quite rapidly calmed down after that. People concentrated on their own races. It might be end of season thinking of points type driving. There, the Ferrari Junior development driver Fuoco, you can see that little flapping end plate I was talking about.
Yeah, they're layered, aren't they? There are various layers of those, and what we've got there is the first couple of layers that's flapping around, so it's probably not causing any problems, is it? But
wouldn't have thought so. Just possibly tagging the wind a little bit at certain angles, but it won't reduce much speed, I wouldn't have thought. Nice to see the car carrying the Forza Jules sticker and hashtag for Jules Bianchi. Very much in the thoughts of the motorsport community worldwide at present. As Max Verstappen is on his last lap of the race, and he's heading for win number 10. Lucas Auer 3.6 seconds behind. I mean, Verstappen's heading for his lunch as well, isn't he? He's that far ahead. I mean, he's virtually done this race. It has been another astounding performance. And I know I keep banging on about the fact that it's his first year of car racing, but this is a mega competitive championship. You look down the CV of the opposition, they've all won races, they've all won titles pretty much in something. And here's a guy fresh out of karting who sticks a limited number of fingers up at them and goes off and wins 10 races.
Absolutely extraordinary. As you say, he is so far ahead. A bit like our sat-nav from the airport yesterday, wasn't it, that had us arriving an hour before we'd left. Here he is then, young Max Verstappen. You can just see Lucas Auer into the back of the picture as well. And this going to be the completion of the race for Max Verstappen. And, well, he's just managed from the front and done everything that he needed to do, and has done very, very well in so doing. Well, Lucas Auer has remained behind, and the gap has been managed by Max Verstappen and increased where necessary. And, well, he's still pushing on. 3.6 the margin, as she's got a final few turns to do, David.
And then win number 10 of the season is just around the corner. He had the 3 wins at Spa. He'd already taken a victory here in the third race when it finally got going for him in the season, but what a year it has been. And Max Verstappen comes across the line then to win round 31 of the FIA Formula 3 European Championship by 3.7 seconds from Lucas Auer. In third place, a distant third place, it will be Tom Blomqvist, and then his teammate Antonio Giovinazzi fourth, Felix Rosenqvist fifth, Jordan King sixth, Esteban Ocon will be seventh. And I think Prema Power team will have a bit of head-scratching and soul-searching to do after this. Gustavo Menezes 8th, Felix Serrales 9th, and Sean Gallard in the points for 10th place. as they come over the line. Galal's about to make it home. He comes out of the final corner, comes through now ahead of Roy Nissany, then Tatiana Calderon, then Ed Jones, then Antonio Fuoco. Through they stream, and Jake Dennis set for 15th place up from the back of the grid, so he was able to make some progress, but a difficult race for many, that, because the field got strung out early. Maybe that was a byproduct of the dramas at the hairpin, with people out breaking themselves and being forced onto the wrong lines, but Max Verstappen has done it again. That win that came here at the start of the year, followed by 3 at Spa, 3 at the Norris Ring. The 8th win came at the Nürburgring, the 9th at Imola, and then the 10th, you've just witnessed it. And what a drive that was. So Max Verstappen, who will be on the top step of 2 podium for this, because there's the rookie podium as well. So he's an outright winner, and he will be on the rookie podium, probably with Esteban Ocon, I think I'm right in saying, as the second rookie.
Be interesting to look at Ocon's facial expressions once again. That race, and a point you made earlier on, in the fact that, you know, after Poe, he had made sure that he now, from there on in, stayed the right side of the knife edge that he'd been on. And just watching him in that race, absolutely measured, calculated, didn't stop pushing at all, was still setting, you know, faster sector times, but just did it absolutely perfectly.
Yeah.
And the car delivered.
The car delivered, and in fairness to Van Amersfoort, we have said over the course of the season about the retirements, sometimes it's Max who's put it in the wall, like at Poe. Other times, mechanical dramas with, the team will tell you, supplied parts. Not down to them, it's down to the equipment they are given, and that's been a problem. If you look at it, you know, here the car ground to a halt on the warming up lap. It had a mechanical problem at Hungary. Remember, the alternator went down in Moscow. If you were to take points from those races, it would be a different story. It still could be an Ocon championship, but it might be being disputed into the last race.
And from a team point of view, you know, when you're up against the Prema Power team, the Carlins, etc., etc., I mean, Van Amersfoort must be jolly thrilled with how it's gone.
Absolutely right. I mean, it's a team that's got a good pedigree back home.
Of course.
It came into this championship last year and has been developing strongly, and you've seen how the team has become more competitive, just as Max Verstappen has. But you've got to say that success is as much down to the driver as the team, because if you take Max out of the equation, where's Shimkowiak and Menezes, relatively speaking? So Verstappen has made a huge difference, and that underlines why he's special, doesn't it? Because there is his car right up there, outpacing his 2 teammates. Looking at the replays of Max Verstappen taking win number 10 to win round 31 of the FIA Formula 3 European Championship. I have to say, I'm looking forward to seeing how he goes in Formula 1 next year. It's not going to be an easy season. I think we've established that, and he will be aware of that. And I'm sure his dad, with his Formula 1 savvy, will be reminding him to keep feet on ground and not expect too much. But it really will be fascinating to see how he goes.
I think what will make it even more fascinating for me is when we find out who he will be alongside.
Yeah, and then you've got a real benchmark.
There's the benchmark.
Yeah. Because we know it's not going to be Daniel Kvyat who's going to Red Bull. The results of round 31 of the championship, won by Max Verstappen, Lucas Auer second, and Tom Blomqvist for the podium third, ahead of his teammate Antonio Giovinazzi. Felix Rosenqvist takes 5th, ahead of Jordan King and Esteban Ocon. Gustavo Menezes 8th, ahead of Felix Serrades, and then Sean Galal rounds out the top 10. 11th, Roy Nissany ahead of Tatiana Calderon, then Ed Jones ahead of Antonio Fuoco and Jake Dennis in 15th, as Max Verstappen celebrates victory at Hockenheim. Jumps down from the car. Straight away he goes across to thank the Van Amersfoort engineers, who have done a great job, not just in terms of delivering a car for that race, but the qualifying sessions as well for the weekend. You have to qualify well in Formula 3. We say it regularly, these cars are not easy in which to overtake, and so much of the work can be done early in the weekend with good laps in qualifying. You've got to get it off the line, but he did that with alacrity, didn't he? And so another excellent performance from Max Verstappen. Just
saw Gerhard Berger looking on there at the cars, and you know, Gerhard Berger must look with satisfaction at how this championship has developed over the last few years, David.
I think he'd be delighted, because he's got the top teams, he's got great drivers, and here Esteban Ocon, as you look at the championship now with 2 races to go, he is the champion and has a link to a Formula 1 team. Max Verstappen second in the championship, a Formula 1 driver for next year.
Yes.
Tom Blomqvist, a very quick driver. Lucas Auer 4th, Antonio Fuoco 5th in the championship, another man with a Formula 1 link, because he's got his junior connections with Ferrari. So the fact that the championship is going from strength to strength, you know, it's got a full entry, a little bit down at the end of the season, but we've had full grids for the bulk of the year. The best teams are in it, the best drivers are in it. Okay, ultimately you could argue that its success has hurt the domestic championships, like the German F3 Cup, like British Formula 3 as well. But as a benchmark top-line international Formula 3 championship, there ain't much wrong with this now.
No.
He goes to great circuits. He's got some fabulous drivers. And Tom Blomqvist in third place then loses touch in his battle to be runner-up in the championship against Max Verstappen, who outscores him then. Blomqvist taking the points for third position. Frustration for him, but he never, I mean, third is good in itself, but he never really looked as though he was going to be able to do a proper fight, did he, in that race? Lucas Auer, likewise, having been good across practice and qualifying, takes second spot. It's good to have him on the podium, and no doubt if Uncle Gerhard is here to present trophies as well, that'll be a good family scene. But once more, Lucas Auer must be a little bit frustrated. It was so near and yet so far, because 3.7 seconds adrift he was of this man. Max Verstappen has done it again. We talk about him as though he were the champion. He's not. He might be the runner-up, but he's won more races thus far than anybody else. A 10th victory of the season coming his way, and doing it without a wheel out of line.
And that's probably another factor that will play on Esteban Ocon, isn't it? And that's the number of race wins for sure. And there we see one of the Max Verstappen banners being unfurled there. As David mentioned earlier, the one that we're used to seeing is the overtaking is an art that accompanied him around nearly all of the circuits that the FIA Formula 3 European Championship has visited. So Saturday, it's first day of 2 days of race action here at Hockenheim, this final weekend of the DTM Championship. And confirmation there of the result once again.
So Max Verstappen it will be for the top step of the podium. The drivers whisked from Parc Fermé up to the podium. Lucas Auer and Tom Blomqvist will join him for the overall podium. There is Max Verstappen. Lucas Auer, the Mercedes driver, is there for second. Mercedes engines, Volkswagen engines for Max Verstappen. Peter Mucker there in the green top, in the grey top rather, the team owner of Mucker Motorsport. And Tom Blomqvist for third place arrives on the podium. Van Amersfoort sends its representative up to the podium as we have the national anthem of the winning driver. And so Max Verstappen takes the race win. The national anthem played for him. The drivers put back on their Hankook caps. And Gerhard Berger is indeed going to present the trophies. The president of the FIA Single-Seater Commission hands over the race winner's trophy. Handshakes to Tom Blomqvist, to his nephew Lucas Auer as well. And the former Ferrari Formula One hero. And indeed BMW touring car racer in the European Touring Car Championship days makes his way off the podium as Martin Hunning of Ravenol comes onto the podium to hand over the team's trophy and congratulate the top three drivers. And then for Lucas Auer, there is a second place trophy to be presented from his uncle. And Tom Blomqvist is the man in the yellow overalls at the far end of the podium, thinking, I need to outscore Max in race 2 and in race 3 to be the runner-up in what has been an enthralling story over the year. Martin Hunning once again presents the third place trophy to Tom Blomqvist. And the three drivers then will get together for photographs on the top step of the podium. And Il Presidente gets involved in the shot as well, I notice. So, drivers, team and presenters all together. 2 more races still to come in the championship. And a calm race, you could argue. Some good battles early on, but ultimately the gaps established themselves. The order was there. I suspect that races 2 and 3 may be a different story. But for now, the only thing on the drivers' minds is spraying the Henkel Trocken around. And once that is done, we need Max Verstappen for the rookie podium. Then the drivers will be whisked away to the press conference. But Max, no stranger to the top step of the podium this year, of course, whether it's been outright victories or the rookie podium. We'll be back in a moment for more silverware. And goes into race 2 later in the day in a very confident frame of mind.
Yes, there's no question about it. It's The best recipe for, going into qualifying is coming off the back of the success and the dominance that he had in that race. So their confirmation once again of the result, with Verstappen taking the win by a margin in the end of very nearly 3.8 seconds over Lucas Sauer. So podium is being readied now for the rookie podium to come. We'll see Max back out there again.
And there you can see on the full result many of those that had dramas, with Michele Beretta, for example, out of the race. Andy Chang with his damage out of the race, and the podium is dressed ready for the 3 drivers in the rookie classification to make their way out. There you can see Max Verstappen celebrating his overall success, and Tom Blomqvist on the podium once again. But yes, Tom Blomqvist's future is perhaps the more unclear. Esteban Ocon, I could imagine ending up in GP2 for next season. Tom Blomqvist, question mark. To the top step of the podium for the rookie classification comes Max Verstappen, and he's going to be joined by those that trailed him home. Esteban Ocon for second place will make his way out. Is there a hint of a smile? Kind of. At least he knows he's won a championship. And there is Antonio Fuoco as the third of the rookie drivers on the podium at the end of round 31. Max Verstappen then takes the rookie classification honours, and Esteban Ocon to his right, Antonio Fuoco to his left, will now receive their trophies, and Gerhard Berger it is once more, who comes out to present another F3 trophy to Max Verstappen in this series looked after by Christoph Hever, that has had such a successful season, and having grown from the F3 Euro Series into the European Championship, it continues to attract top teams and top drivers. And Esteban Ocon, the overall champion, receives his second place trophy, and Antonio Fuoco will receive his third place trophy as well. And all of these drivers, of course, have been outright race winners this year repeatedly in their rookie season.
We were talking about how the strength of the Formula 3 European Championship has perhaps, caused a little bit of pain for the domestic series. Do you think the domestics now will act as a feeder into this championship?
It's hard to know really what their future is, because if they're struggling for entries, personally, I wouldn't like to see the domestic championships shrivel and die. I'd like to see them continue, but I think it will take quite a long slog from those championships to build them back up. But there are teams in categories spending a lot of money to struggle to be in even mid-grid. They may decide that a domestic championship is a cheaper option with better results to be had. We'll wait and see what happens for 2015. For now, though, let's have a look back at some of the highlights of round 31. Join us for race 2 later in the day here from Hockenheim. But for now, for Dave Richardson and me, David Addison, bye-bye.